lips and may dwell in our hearts. Then they came to Capernaum, and on the Sabbath Jesus entered the synagogue and taught. The people were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as of the scribes. In their synagogue was a man with an unclean spirit. He cried out, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." Jesus rebuked him and said, "Quiet, come out of him." The unclean spirit convulsed him, and with a loud cry came out of him. All were amazed and asked one another, "What is this? A new teaching with authority. He commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him." His fame spread everywhere throughout the whole region of Galilee. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
There was a kindergarten teacher who gave her class an assignment. I want you to draw a picture of someone you love. So all the kids would get out their crayons and their markers, and they're all drawing everything. And the teacher's going by each one, and trying to figure out, what they're drawing. And the teacher came up to this one girl, and she didn't know what she was drawing. And so she asked, "What are you drawing? Who are you drawing? Who's the person you love that you're drawing?" And the little girl said, "I'm drawing God." And the kindergarten teacher said, "Well, nobody knows what God looks like. How can you? Nobody knows." And she just keeps right on drawing. They'll know in a minute. What is your image of God? What is your image of God? Do you picture God like this long, flowing white hair and the beard and the white robe sitting on a throne? What is your image of God? Is your image of God like the Israelites in the first reading? They were so afraid of God. They said, "We don't want to see him again. We don't want to hear him again, lest we die." There was a common belief that's scattered all throughout the Old Testament that if you saw the face of God, you would die instantly. Right? And so they're just afraid. Is your image of God one of fear? Like, are you afraid of God sending you to hell? Do you obey God out of fear? Or is your image of God kind of like Moses in the first reading? Moses trusted God fully. All right? And Moses was obedient, was a servant, was humble. Do we have as our image of God of one that we humbly serve? Or maybe your image of God is like the demon in the gospel. Wherever God is, you want to go the other way. You don't want to pray. You don't want to go to church. You don't want to do anything with God. You just want to be left alone and do your own thing. Or perhaps, maybe your image of God might be like the crowd in that synagogue in Capernaum that we heard about. What did the gospel say? They were astonished. They were amazed. Simply amazed at who Jesus was. Teaching with authority, casting out demons. Is your image of God one of amazement, wonder, mystery, awe? Or maybe your image of God is kind of like Paul, that we heard from in the second reading. Remember Paul? He literally fell off his high horse at his moment of conversion. All right? And from that point on, every single thing he did was all for the greater glory of God. Is that your image of God? Perhaps you can find yourself in one, that was just 5 different images of God. Perhaps you can find yourself in some of those images. And perhaps maybe it might be a little blend of those different images of God. But I think it's an important question to ask every now and then. Who is God to me? What is my image of God? Danny Dutton, when he was 8 years old, second grader at a Catholic school in Chula Vista, California, which is right on the border of by Tijuana, by San Diego, he had an assignment. The assignment was to explain God. Let me share with you his image of God. One of God's main jobs is making people. He makes them to replace the ones that die so that there will be enough people to take care of things on earth. He doesn't make grown-ups, just babies. I think because they're smaller and easier to make. That way he doesn't have to take up his valuable time teaching them to talk and walk. He can leave that to their moms and dads. God's second most important job is listening to prayers. An awful lot of this goes on since some people, like preachers and such, pray at times outside of bedtime. Because of this, God does not have time to listen to the radio or TV. Because God hears everything, there must be a terrible amount of noise in his ears, unless he has thought of a way to turn it off somehow. God sees everything and hears everything and is everywhere, which keeps him pretty busy. So you shouldn't go wasting his time by going over your mom and dad's head, asking for something they said you couldn't have. Atheists are people who don't believe in God. I don't think there are any in Chula Vista. At least there aren't any who come to my church. Jesus is God's son. He used to do all the hard work, like walking on water and performing miracles and trying to teach people who didn't want to learn about God. They finally got tired of him preaching to them, and so they crucified him. But he was good and kind, just like his dad. And he told his father that they didn't know what they were doing and to forgive them. And God said, okay. His dad, God, appreciated everything that his son Jesus had done and all his hard work on earth, so he told him he didn't have to go out on the road anymore. He could stay in heaven. And so he did. And now he helps his dad out by listening to prayers and seeing things which are important for God to take care of, and which ones he can take care of himself without having to bother God. Jesus is like a secretary, only more important. You can pray anytime you want, and they are sure to help you because they got it worked out so one of them is always on duty all the time. You should always go to church on Sunday because it makes God happy. And if there's anybody you want to make happy, it's God. Don't skip church or do anything or do something you think will be more fun, like going to the beach. This is wrong. And besides, the sun doesn't come out at the beach until noon anyway. If you don't believe in God, besides being an atheist, you will be very lonely because your parents can't go everywhere with you, like summer camp, but God can. It's good to know He's around you, and when you're scared, or in the dark, or when you can't swim and you get thrown into the real deep water by the big kids. But you shouldn't just always think of what God can do for you. What can you do for God? I figure God put me here, and He can take me back anytime He pleases. And that's why I believe in God. 8 years old. 8 years old. What a grasp. What a great, beautiful image of God. What is your image of God? Who is God to you? Is it one of fear? Is it a relationship of fear and trepidation? Is it one of awe and mystery and wonder? Is it one of love? Is it one of dedication? Let me give you one more story. It involves a parent, and they had a son, maybe 10, 11 years old, and this boy, he was kind of a wanderlust, I guess. He got out of school at 3 o'clock every day, but he wouldn't get home until like 5, 5:30, 6 o'clock sometimes. And, Mom and Dad would get worried. Where is he? And he just kind of went from one thing to another, just floated around. He had little concept of time, I guess. And so the parents thought, we got to do something. This is getting out of hand. So they called their son in. They said, son, this is what we're going to do. What your behavior is unacceptable. You can't just take 3 hours to get from school to home. All right? You have to be home. We have dinner at a distinct time. You got to be able to do this. So the next time you come home late, hours late for dinner, all you're going to have is 1 piece of bread and a glass of water. Do you understand, son? And the boy looked at Mom and Dad right in the eye and says, yes, I do. Good. Wouldn't you know? 3 days later, the boy comes waltzing in about 6 o'clock at night. So, he comes in, sees the living room, goes to the living room, sees Dad, says, hi, Dad. Dad doesn't say a word. He goes into the kitchen, sees Mom cooking, smells real good. Hi, Mom! Mom doesn't say a word. Finally, it's dinner time. They get to the table. Mom and Dad have these nice big plates filled with food. And this boy's got one piece of bread and a lonely glass of water. The boy looks at his mom's plate, looks at his dad's plate, looks at his own. That's when the tears start coming, you know. And then after a good minute or so, just watching them and he grasping the situation. After about a full minute, uncomfortable silence. The dad takes his full plate of food and switches it out with the son's. So now the dad just has one piece of bread and water. The boy grows old. He grows into an adult. And one of the things he reflected on as an adult was this. He said, I will always know what God is like because what my dad did to me that night at supper. You know, if you don't, you probably know this already, but if you don't, you'll know it now. The only person, the only one who's going to be with you your whole entire life is God. Sadly, everyone comes and goes. Parents, best friends, grandparents, classmates. They all kind of drift in and drift out of our lives. The only one who's going to be with us our entire life, in this life and the next, is God. So don't you think it's a little important to think about your relationship with God and your image of God? In the Mexican culture, when someone is getting ready to go on a trip, they always say, Vaya con Dios, which means go with God. Good advice for us today. Amen.